I want to tell you about something that happened recently that I wasn't entirely proud of. Recently, I finished recording what I genuinely think is one of the best interviews I've ever done for this show. My guest was exceptional, sharp, generous, said things in ways that I hadn't heard before. And he told me afterwards he'd really enjoyed the conversation and has even agreed to come back, which was such a nice surprise. In the hour that followed, I caught myself doing something that I thought I'd outgrown. I wasn't doing anything dramatic. I was just sitting there quietly, letting my mind run forward. Maybe his audience would find the episode. It's got a big audience. Maybe it would get shared in the right places. Maybe things would really take off in a new way. Perhaps the right event organizer would hear it and reach out. Maybe this was one episode that would really shift things. I've been doing this long enough to know exactly what that voice is. It's the voice that's waiting to be discovered. And I genuinely thought I dealt with this a long time ago, but apparently not entirely. I'm going to come back to that story because what happened in that hour was a near perfect illustration of something that I see in almost every speaker I've ever worked with. A pattern that looks harmless, sometimes even looks like optimism, but quietly costs bookings, fees, and months of momentum. I'm calling it the discovery trap. And if you're a professional speaker, there's a very good chance that you're in it right now without realizing. The discovery trap is this: building a business strategy that depends on something happening that you can't directly cause. It shows up in different forms depending on where you are. If you're earlier in your speaking career, it might look like submitting a profile to a speaker bureau and waiting, checking your email, wondering when they'll come back to you, telling yourself, "Oh, they must be busy. They get a lot of submissions. It'll happen." I'm actually doing an episode soon with Dominic Eldred-Earl from the London Speaker Bureau. So we're going to get the real inside view on how that process actually works, what bureaus are genuinely looking for, and what speakers get wrong about that relationship. And that one is, I promise you, worth waiting for. But whether you're working with a bureau or not, the pattern has the same shape at every career stage. Mid-career, it looks like creating content and hoping the right people find it. Posting something on LinkedIn that maybe gets you 7 or 47 likes and 3 comments saying, "Oh, so true," but 0 inquiries. It felt productive. It produced nothing commercial. More established speakers aren't immune either. It looks like waiting for a referral someone promised after a conference in March, waiting for a relationship to turn into a recommendation, waiting for the right connection to make the right introduction to that person that you know that they must know you want to be introduced to. None of these are irrational. Bureaus matter, content matters, relationships matter, really matter. The problem is when they become the strategy. When the actual plan is put good work out there and wait for someone to notice. Because then you're not running a speaking business. You're running a lottery with a professional speaker page. And the question I keep coming back to, the one I had to ask myself that afternoon after the interview, is this: what am I doing that might happen against what am I doing that I can directly cause and influence? The mechanism underneath the discovery trap is a question most speakers ask constantly without even noticing it. Could this work? Could this episode bring in clients? Could this collaboration lead somewhere? Could this talk on a smaller stage get me seen by someone who books bigger ones? The answer to all of those questions is almost always technically yes. And that's exactly why the question is useless. It requires no evidence to answer that. They could happen, but it creates the feeling of strategic thinking without actually doing any. And it gives you permission to keep doing whatever you're currently doing without interrogating whether it's actually working. So let's refer to it as hopium. And I'd say this is someone who's been addicted to the stuff for a long time. Hopium, living on hope. And it's addictive. And let me be specific because vague confessions are easy. In the past year, I've built multiple interactive tools for my website: a free speaking audit, a prospecting planner, a positioning tool, a LinkedIn profile auditor. Each one felt like building. Each one felt productive. I put genuine thought into them. In the same period, the first thing that actually produced the coaching client was a referral from someone I'd had a direct conversation with. And the article that generated the most genuine interest was one I wrote in October and followed up on personally. The tools didn't produce clients, the direct conversations did. And that's not a coincidence, that's evidence. The question that actually serves you isn't, could this work? It's, is this likely to move the needle? Not possible, but likely, based on what's actually produced results before, what works for you and for others in similar spaces to yourself, what's converted, what's connected, what has a direct line to a paid booking, what might happen versus what can I cause to happen. Those are more answerable questions. Could this work? Is not so much. There is a version of the discovery trap that isn't about being found by the right person. It's about waiting for permission to be the person you already are. And this one's a little more personal. I've been doing stand-up comedy for a while now, and it's part of how I think, how I communicate, how I see the world. Now, my mentor, Neil, I've mentioned him before in videos, but more on him in a moment. He told me directly that integrating comedy into my speaking and coaching brand is a strong differentiated positioning, not a liability as I'd been viewing it, a genuine competitive advantage. Got me thinking. And for years, I didn't fully own it on stage. I hadn't done that. Not because I didn't believe in it, but because I was afraid of getting groans. You know, the groan, that specific low frequency sound an audience makes when a joke lands badly because you were trying to make people laugh. The kind that makes you want to quietly leave the room and maybe even hope that the ground opens up and swallows you. I have a specific memory attached to it as well. Me, 16-year-old me, in year 5 drama class in front of all of my friends at school, for reasons I can no longer fully reconstruct, I decided to do stand up in front of my classmates. And it was abysmal. Not the sort of needs work abysmal, actively, memorably, painfully abysmal. I still feel a little embarrassed thinking about those terrible jokes now. And somewhere in the back of my head, that 16-year-old version of me has been casting a quiet veto on how funny I allow myself to be on stage or in front of other people ever since. That's a permission problem. Not waiting for a bureau to pick me, not waiting for a referral, waiting for some internal authority to say, yes, you're allowed to be this version of yourself in professional rooms. The permission never came because it doesn't work like that. You don't get cleared for takeoff by the committee that's been holding you back. You just decide to take off. I wonder how many bookings that's cost me over the years. I don't really like to think about it, right? Maybe not catastrophically, but quietly, cumulatively. The rooms where I was slightly less than I could have been, the impact slightly diluted, the memorability slightly reduced. What might have happened if I'd owned it sooner versus what I'm choosing to cause now? Here's one I find the hardest to admit, which is probably why it's going in the podcast rather than just the videos. I've been in the personal development and communication space for over 15 years. In that time, I've worked as an NLP practitioner, a hypnotherapist, a speaking coach, a keynote speaker, a podcast host, a stand-up comedian. I've developed multiple frameworks, multiple offers, multiple identities. And for a long time, too long, I was running several of them simultaneously, half committed to each of them, fully committed to none. And the thing is, every new identity felt like a genuine evolution. And some of them were also a version of the same pattern, starting something new when the current thing got uncomfortable, which we'll come back to. Here's the diagnosis I landed on, and it's not comfortable. The market rewards repetition. The social media algorithms reward it as well. The speaker rewards novelty, and the speaker is usually wrong with this. People need to hear something multiple times before they internalize it. This may not be the first time you come across this concept. Before they associate it with you. Before they think of you when someone asks, hey, do you know a good speaker on this topic? The speaker who becomes known for one clear idea gets booked more than the speaker who has 17 interesting ones. I know this from watching it happen to other people. We can probably see it in the professional world as well. Those people who seem to be at the top of particularly the speaking industry, are often known for one particular idea or concept more than anything else. We also know it from watching it not happen for me during the periods when I was spreading the message too thin. And I still, right now, this week, have to actively resist the pull toward the next idea because interesting is more stimulating than consistent. New ideas feel like progress, repetition feels like stagnation. A real danger in the keynote speaking industry when we're often giving the same keynotes again and again. Why we have to keep adapting and making small changes, playing with our delivery and adapting to our audiences in order to not fall into this. But repetition isn't creative death. Repetition is how your audience learns to describe you to the person who hires speakers. And if your audience can't tell someone what you stand for in one sentence, the problem probably isn't your audience. And if you find yourself regularly pivoting to the next idea just as the current one is starting to slowly get traction, that's worth sitting with because that pivot might be evolution or it might be the discovery trap in a clever disguise. But what might happen if I stayed with this idea a little longer versus what can I cause by committing to it now? Which brings me back to Neil. Neil has become a good friend of mine. He's the person I very first learned coaching off back in the early 2000s, and we reconnected several years ago. Now, he spent the better part of 3 decades building businesses and has recently retired. He's not someone who gives up easily or speaks carelessly. I don't even know if he's really fully retired. He still loves to have good chats about business and stuff. Last week at lunch, he told me that he no longer believes that just anybody can be an entrepreneur. After all that time, after building all the real things, he says he no longer agrees anymore with all those voices out there who are telling everyone that they can do this if they just want it enough. Music to my ears. It's a hard road. It's full of rejection, and most people genuinely are not built for it, despite what people might say. And if the stars don't align, if things don't happen more easily for people, a lot of people tend to give up on these projects way sooner than they might with anything else. Now, I didn't argue with Neil on this because when he said it, I recognized something in what he said. And I feel for myself, and this is what I said to him as well, that I've always floated somewhere between employee and entrepreneur, and possibly still do, really, if I'm honest. The security of salary has always had some appeal, and it's what I knew for most of my life as well. But that security has always been appealing, even when I've been building something I believe in. And that ambivalence, that not quite fully committed position, is exactly what makes shiny object syndrome so appealing. Because if you haven't fully bet on your path, every new idea is also a quiet escape route. It's a reset. Earlier in my career, I wasn't just chasing one shiny object. I was running at several at the same time. I was doing multiple MLMs, multiple tracks, marketing several businesses, multiple ideas, all going nowhere fast because none of them had my full attention and none of them were addressing the thing that I was actually avoiding. And they were all to do with this need to make it and to make it fast. Like something, I was doing all these things. Something has to happen with all of this. And that is not what happened at all. Something didn't happen with all these other than me kind of wiping myself out. And the realization came eventually that I was good at starting things, not so good at the uncomfortable middle bit, and pretty terrible at the actual follow through and finish. Here's what I eventually understood about shiny object syndrome that nobody had told me directly, not even all these gurus in personal development. You don't get it when things are going well. You get it when the current things have lost their shine, when the pipeline's thin, when rejections are piling up, when strategy's working, but it's so slow. It's just not fast enough. When you feel like you're running out of runway. The shiny object appears on a schedule, and that schedule is whenever the direct move is available but uncomfortable. And it's not randomness, and it's not weak discipline either. It's avoidance with a business plan attached. Now, the new content format, the new tool, the new content format, the new tool, the new offer, the new market, all of which are more appealing, more exciting and shiny, the grass being greener on this other side of the fence. all more appealing than calling someone who might say no to you. Now, at some point, I got tired of my own pattern and realized I was avoiding sales, not just uncomfortable with it, actively, creatively sometimes avoiding it. So I did something that made no obvious sense at the time. I went and got a job in sales, a job that actually trained me in sales as well. And it wasn't so much because I needed the money or needed to be in sales. It was because I needed to make myself do the thing that I was terrible at until I wasn't terrible at it anymore. And it also happily coincided with the time when I really wanted to be more involved in the podcasting community as well. So cold calls, real rejection, sometimes people screaming at me down the phone, those things really happened repeatedly until the fear of picking up the phone just stopped being a thing. What I found on the other side of that wasn't a sales superpower. It was just a bit of clarity. I knew what the direct move was. I knew that fear of sales is most quickly dealt with by picking up the bloody phone. And when you know what the next direct move is, the shiny object loses most, if not all of its appeal, because you're not looking for an escape route. You're already doing the thing. Shiny object syndrome isn't a discipline problem. It's more a pipeline and activity clarity problem. What might happen if I tried this new thing versus what can I cause to happen by doing the direct thing right now? So back to that afternoon after the interview, I noticed that voice. I recognized the pattern, and I've had enough practice at this point that the recognition is fairly quick, even if the feeling is still there. And I did the only thing that actually helps. I went back to my pipeline and asked myself, what could I directly cause to happen that day? Not what might happen, not what could happen. What could I cause? There's a prospect I've been meaning to follow up with for a few weeks, someone who told me she wants to work together when the time is right. Great. That's a warm contact sitting in a drawer. So I sent her a short direct message. No pitch, just presence, just checking in to see if there's a conversation to be had. Done in 5 minutes. Can't produce content from it, doesn't go into a portfolio, just the work. And also some calls with current coaching clients that I'm going to have a specific conversation with about referrals, so I can give them a clear description of who else I can help. So if they do know anyone, know exactly who to think of. And that's it. Two things, both direct, both things I can cause rather than hope will happen. Now, will either of them deliver results? Again, I don't know for certain, but are they more likely to create results? Yeah, a bit. So neither of them is as satisfying as finishing a piece of content, which feels very achievement orientated. Neither of them gives me anything to post about, particularly. Neither of them feels like building in the way that writing or recording or creating feels like building. But one client referred by a current client would do more for my business than any amount of content that might find the right person if the algorithm cooperates and the YouTube gods and LinkedIn overlords smile upon me. What might happen if I keep producing great content versus what I can cause by having several direct conversations this week? I know which one I'm betting on. The episode with my guest is going to be great. Can't wait to bring it to you. That's going to be out end of July. And I genuinely wanted to bring new listeners into this world, to open doors and maybe even catch the ear of someone who books speakers. I'm just not running my business as though it will, because that's the distinction that matters. Not between optimism and pessimism, not between ambition and realism, but between what might happen and what I can genuinely actually cause. The discovery trap isn't about being naive or undisciplined. It's about mistaking hope for a plan. And most speakers I know, including me on a regular basis, fall into it because, not because they're not smart, but because the hopeful version of events is far more comfortable than the direct one. The direct one involves calling people up who might say no. It involves following up with someone who might get annoyed with you, might lose patience, or having a referral conversation that might feel awkward. Asking directly for something rather than creating the conditions where someone might, hopefully, fingers crossed, offered it. That's the work. It's not glamorous. It doesn't produce content. And it's the only part of your business that doesn't require anyone else's permission. algorithm, goodwill, or timing to function. If you want to build a speaking business that doesn't depend on being discovered, one with clear positioning, a direct route to the people who hire speakers, and a pipeline that you can see and act on, that's exactly what I work with speakers on in the Known Booked and Paid Accelerator. It's not a course you sit through, it's a structured coaching program where we build the actual infrastructure. So your next move is always something that you can cause, not something that you're hoping will happen. We build a business engine. The details are in the show notes or the YouTube description. And if it sounds like what you need, please come and check it out. And if you want to talk it through first, there is a link there to book a call as well. In the meantime, next week, I'll be back with a great guest episode. So until then, go and do something worth talking about. See you next time.